Well, good morning. There you are. How about that? We are back in the saddle. Yes, Brian Main, John Begnasco. It's been a while. Thank you so much. Some things don't change, John.
Yeah,
right?
I haven't missed anything for 3 weeks.
It's so funny. We talk about my laptop, the audio being on. Last couple of times, I remembered to turn it off. But now, see, you're back.
Really?
And I forgot to turn it off. So it's Brian Main, John Begnasco. Tiger is off today. Tiger has kid duty today, a soccer tournament up in Temecula, California, with his son and his family. So it's back with, again, John and myself. John, good to see you. We were trying to figure out how long it's been since we actually were in studio together. I would say total about a month maybe for you.
Close, yeah. But I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back here in the studio. We're going to miss Tiger today, but we've got a great guest lined up. We'll talk about that as we progress into the first segment. Melinda Myers is going to be with us today, John, and it's been a while since we've spoken with Melinda.
She's one of our favorite people.
Always a great guest, too.
Yeah.
A lot of great information. So we'll have Melinda on later. And for those of you that are tuned into Facebook Live right now, thank you so much. And thank you for your patience as we had some things happen, some vacation time, some sickness, things happening, which precluded us from being in studio doing our Facebook Live show. And those on Biz Talk Radio, want to remind you once again, this is a pre-recorded show from last week. So thank you for tuning in.
I'm trying to think, if I listened to you guys while I was gone.
Did you?
I was going to, but I can't remember.
Bring up the old Facebook page?
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, you were in Wyoming. I'm sure you talked about your trip to Wyoming. And your son has a ranch, right?
Basically, they bought
100 acres?
Three acres. It seems like 100 acres. So him and his wife are out there starting a new life in Cheyenne with more property than I've seen in quite a long time. And your son, too, he's in Indiana. Doing the Indiana thing now with a nice new home, right?
That's where I was just visiting. My daughter drove down, and her family drove down from Idaho to visit the week before we left, and then she stayed on another week to water my plants because we talked about the problem, right, of when you go somewhere. You had cats and plants to take care of.
Yeah, we talked about the fact that it's not just when you have cats, when you have animals, when you have plants. You don't just pack up and go on vacation. You've got a plan for who's going to be taking care of them, who's going to be watering. You know, we've got fish, we've got cats, plants. You've got the same thing. And you said that when you got home, most, if not all of your plant material is okay, but you did lose a few being gone.
I'm not sure what it was from.
Nobody takes care of our plants the way we do. When you have somebody else come in, it's just not the same.
My daughter did an excellent job, though, because not only did she water, she pulled out all the weeds.
Really?
And
over and beyond, huh?
Oh, it was unbelievable the amount of work she did. I think she went home from her vacation to rest up.
Anyway, John, it's good to see you. Good to be back in the saddle here. This is Garden America, Brian Main, John Begnasco. Tiger's off today. We're going to have Melinda Myers as our guest. And, of course, all of you on Facebook Live, we welcome your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind. Go ahead and post them there in the chat column, right-hand side of your Facebook page, on your computer, your laptop, your phone. Some people I know watch on big screen TVs, John. That's quite an experience.
You know, my screen was frozen.
Are you okay now?
And then I guess it's just I haven't been here for such a long time. I thought, oh, there's that little arrow right in the center of the screen.
I don't have, my closed captioning didn't come on like it normally does.
Really? Mine did. I got it off. But anyway, I found if you have a video and you press the arrow, it just starts.
Yeah, Gina says watering roses is a lot like taking care of cats. Angry cats, that is.
Well, the bushes this time of year are taller, right?
Right.
And you prune them back in the spring, and you can get in between them. But now they're, waist high and chest high, and you start walking through those rows to water, and you come out and you're a bloody mess.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know what? I've got gloves, and I never remember to put them on. And halfway through watering or trimming, I say to myself, Self, what are you doing? Go put the gloves on.
Hey, our friends from Tucson are saying it's hot over there.
I'll bet. What is it? Mid-July now. What is it? Over 100?
Oh, it's got to be over 100.
At least, right?
We landed on the way back from Indiana. We landed in Phoenix, and the temperature was 108 when we landed. So
108.
Yeah, I think they're used to that though.
Yeah, right. And you've got the humidity back there, too, as well.
Oh, the humidity in Indiana was terrible.
So you get out of the shower, you dry off, and you're still wet.
You know, it's almost oppressive. Like, I can't breathe like this.
It's like you're smothered, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you lived in it for
home.
the first part of your life.
Why do you think I moved, though? That was one of the reasons.
Yeah, unbelievable. So anyway, welcome back. Thank you for your support here on Garden America. Thank you to the good folks on Biz Talk Radio who played some recorded previous shows the last couple of weeks. This will be the first live pre-recorded show that you'll receive this week when we package the show up and send it off to the network. Let's see.
Shout out.
Redding, California, 107 or 108, according to Linda.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's
108 in Redding.
Yeah, that's hot.
That's like Palm Springs weather.
Yeah, I can imagine Palm Springs, probably 120 at least.
Well, I wanted to give a shout out to the San Diego Botanic Garden. Got our good friend John Clements.
John is always, he's a good man. He always tunes in. He's always got something to say, and we appreciate John Clements.
We should have him come in studio sometime.
We should.
You know, we've interviewed him before, but...
We've got a chair. We've got an extra chair, extra mic. We could do that.
There's been an extra chair here for 3 weeks now.
Yeah, exactly, right? So again, Tiger's off today. Tiger will be reunited with us next week. He's got soccer commitments with his son up in Temecula, California. Let's see. John, we can talk about the newsletter. Why don't we do the quote of the week, John? We've still got some time left in our segment. Then we'll bring on Melinda Myers in segment number 2.
Okay, the quote of the week is from your buddy Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein.
What's Einstein mean? Ein is one. Stein is what? Beer mug?
Beer mug.
One beer mug.
One beer mug.
Yeah.
So here's what one beer mug had to say.
And I picked the quote because Melinda was going to talk a little bit about pollinators today.
Right.
Or so Tiger told me. And Albert Einstein said that if the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then man would only have 4 years of life left. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more man.
Pretty cryptic, but there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, he knew what he was talking about a lot of times.
So,
some of his theories were just relative, though.
Exactly. Okay, John, middle of the summertime. What about watering? We're going to have Melinda on here, obviously, before too long, but it seems very obvious this time of the year that you would just turn up the watering schedule, or what do people need to be aware of? I'm talking about pots and in-ground.
It depends how hot it is and what it is you're watering. There's plants have a transpiration rate, and that's the amount of water that evaporates from their leaves compared to taking up water through the roots. And once it's really hot, and if you've got dry winds especially, blowing on it, the plants can't take the water up fast enough to replace what's going out of the leaves.
Okay, sure.
So even if you water, the soil becomes super saturated, but it doesn't do any good. The plants just can't take it up. So if you've got tender plants, fuchsia would be a good example. Mm-hmm. If you're in a hot, dry area and your fuchsia starts to wilt, you can water all you want and it's going to stay wilted. So the only thing you could do would be to bring it indoors maybe until the heat passed. One of our rosarian friends, Jan, is up in Brentwood, California in the Bay Area. And don't you usually picture temperatures cooler up there, right?
Usually, but that hasn't been the case lately.
She says it's going to be over 100 there today.
It's crazy.
I know.
That's crazy.
And, but you know what? I was surprised when I was in Idaho, even with temperatures I think they just finished a week over 100. And last year they had a month that was over 100. And things still stay green. And I guess there's plenty of water, so it just depends.
Yeah.
And if the plants are adapted to those to begin with, it's when you bring in non-native plants and try to grow them in an area that they naturally would not be found that you begin to have problems.
We're going to take a break, our first break of the morning here on Garden America, end of segment 1. Segment 2 coming up. we're going to get a hold of Melinda Myers. She's our guest today. So again, thank you for tuning in. Those on Biz Talk Radio, pre-recorded show. Those on Facebook Live, thank you for tuning in. Back with Brian Main, yours truly, John Begnasco. And again, back after these messages with our good friends on Biz Talk Radio. Do stay with us. All right, we are back from the break. Good morning to you once again, or maybe good afternoon, depending upon whatever the case may be where you're listening. However you may be listening to us here on Garden America. Happy weekend, nevertheless. I'm Brian Main. We've got John Begnasco. Tiger is off this week. John, I think we've taken care of any business before we bring Melinda on. Are we good to go?
We are.
Okay, let's bring our good friend Melinda Myers onto the show, and let's learn some more things about this wacky world of gardening.
Hey, good morning, Melinda.
Good morning. Great to chat with you guys.
It seems like we talk to you frequently, but it's never enough.
Okay, that's how I feel exactly. And you always brighten my mornings when we get to talk gardening with your listeners and each other.
Yeah, and today, Brian was asking me a few weeks ago to explain the birds and the bees to him. And I said, you know what?
That's a little late, isn't it?
Let's have Melinda on. She'll do a better job than I would.
Actually, Melinda, I just wanted to preview a refresher course.
I was visiting Indiana last week, and it reminded me of my days in Michigan, and I can relate a little bit better to what you're going through today. After being in near 100-degree temperatures with 80-90% humidity, and a whole different landscape to look at.
Oh, you bet. It's, I think as gardeners, every year is different, right? And I always laugh because every time I travel and people go, well, you know what we say here, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. And I'm like, well, that's what we say in Wisconsin and Ohio and Indiana and Michigan. So, yeah. It doesn't always change for the better either.
I was excited to see a difference in the plant palette out there. There's a lot more conifers than we have here, and a lot more walls of green, a lot of deciduous trees that we can't grow. Brian, we never see maple trees here. They just won't grow in Southern California. And it was nice to see maples everywhere we looked. And at my son's home, there was a 20-foot sweet bay magnolia.
Oh, nice.
And I was thinking, I didn't even think those things grew that far north, but apparently they do.
Yeah, our Botanic garden has one that's probably, it's borderline, and it's in a somewhat sheltered area by a building and other plantings. And so it's on its northern limits. Indiana's a little bit milder than I am here in Wisconsin, but definitely pushing the limit. But I think that's what all gardeners do. Years ago, I did a show called Yardworks, and we shot in Southern California. We did a few private gardens and celebrity gardens, and I was visiting somebody originally from the Midwest, and they were telling me that they would get blocks of ice to surround their lilacs to try to give them the chill so they could bloom. And you have lots of cool plants in Southern California. We can't grow in the Midwest. So I was like, why not embrace what you can grow there? Give it up. The lilacs are wonderful, But really, finding a low chill that'll work in a warm area, I had to laugh. Gardeners will do anything to grow their favorite plants.
Well, it's funny you mentioned lilacs because I was looking, my son lives on an acre, and the backyard is pretty much just lawn right now. And I was thinking, right along that fence, I'd put in a whole row of lilacs, and then I'd plant peonies in front of them.
All the things you miss from Michigan, right?
Yeah, all the things that I miss from Michigan. And they were in the middle of a drought there. And it hadn't rained for 10 days, Brian. Can you imagine that?
Hey, John, we've got...
I've learned not to complain about droughts to you guys because obviously our idea of a drought and yours is very different.
Hey, Melinda, we've got a question.
It's drier than normal summer for much of the Midwest.
We've got a question that's pretty pertinent as far as your neck of the woods in Wisconsin. A viewer, listener says that her daughter just moved outside of Green Bay and wants to ask what vegetables could still be planted in the garden there, if any.
Well, radishes.
We're not. Well, that's a great question. So one of the things that I like to tell people is it's never too late to add some things to the garden. And basically what her daughter needs to do is look at the average fall frost. For Green Bay, it can be as early as the end of September. Usually the average is around early October. So you count back the number of days from when you plant to the first fall frost. Radishes, definitely a good choice, John. You might even be able to squeak in some cucumbers. And anything, you look at the seed packet, and then some garden centers are even offering things like broccoli and cabbage that will take even a light frost. Then you pop those in the garden. So you harvest during the cool weather, lettuce, beets, things like that. So tell her to check the seed packets, look at the average first fall frost. In Green Bay, I think it's around early October. Even in Milwaukee, we've had it as early as September 23rd and as late as November 15th. So, it's the weather. But I like to use row covers, which are spun fabric that let air, light, and water through but trap the heat. So I'm notorious for planting late. I always blame it on people that I'm telling them how to garden, so I get my garden in late. And I cover it with the row cover, and then if we have, some of them will protect down to 24 degrees. So it really extends your time. And a lot of times that first fall frost, we have 2 weeks of great weather afterwards. So, that might be another thing that her daughter could do to get a few fresh veggies growing in her new home.
Oh, so you might only need the row cover for as temporary, just to protect from that one-time frost.
Correct. And what I like about it is, if we're going to have a couple of frosts a few days in a row, you can leave it on because it lets the air and light through, so you don't have to pull it off in the morning, put it down. Though I do have lots of sheets that it seems like every fall I'm protecting something because we need to shoot a video or I haven't quite harvested all my tomatoes or whatever, and I run out of row cover. So, so you're right. It can jumpstart the season. You can use it also for insect control. So things like Japanese beetles on basil and beans. Beans don't need bees for pollination. And so you can cover those and keep the Japanese beetles off for those of us with problems with Japanese beetles. I think it was Colorado State University or Michigan did some research and found covering even squash plants at planting and then leaving it on until the flowers form, both the male and female, and pulling it off reduces your problems with squash bugs and squash vine borer. And, obviously you need to let the bees in to get to the flowers, but covering early in the season prevents those insects. They find somewhere else to dine and damage. So it's a very handy tool that you can reuse until it's in shreds, and the insects can get through or the cold.
I was surprised the first time I saw them being used here in Southern California in the middle of summer. And it was for two reasons. The insects that you mentioned is one, but the other was to stop fruit from burning. Peppers, the pepper fruit, the sun would be so intense in the summer that you would get scorch marks on the fruit. And so by covering them, it eliminated that.
Hey, Melinda, we're going to take a break. When we return, more with our interview with Melinda Myers from Wisconsin. I got that right, John, the great state of Wisconsin?
I think you did.
Okay. Anyway, for those on Facebook Live, questions, comments right there on the right-hand side in the comment column. Those on Biz Talk Radio, remember, you can hear the show live every week if you go to our Facebook page, Garden America Radio Show. We kick things off at 8:06 Pacific Time, Eastern Time Zone, 11:06. With that in mind, speaking of Biz Talk Radio, back after these messages. Do stay with us. All righty, we are back. Thank you for listening to our many sponsors on Biz Talk Radio. Those on Facebook Live, we appreciate you tuning in each and every week. It is good to be back in the studio. Tigers off this week. I'm Brian Main, John Begnasco, Melinda Myers. And, John, we are off to a great start with Melinda, no doubt about it.
How can you not be off to a great start when you're talking to Melinda? You know, one of the things that I had forgotten about and quickly came to mind when I was visiting Indiana was we went to a couple garden centers, and I was shocked. And then I quickly realized, of course, you know, that that's the way they do it in the Midwest, that there were no starter plants available in the garden centers. And you could buy completely, like hanging baskets that were fully grown, or landscape shrubs, but the annuals and the vegetable starters that you can go into practically 12 months a year here in California and find weren't there. And the obvious reason was it's just too late.
You know, you're absolutely right. My frustration is it'd be great to plant some broccoli and Brussels sprout, well, not Brussels sprouts, but broccoli and cabbage transplants in early July for a fall harvest. And you may find them, but you're right. Most garden centers have found that there's not enough of a market for people planting for a fall harvest. And frost comes early. And so I think, you know, when I started years ago, people would plant Memorial Day, and when the first fall frost came, that was it. But now I'm finding some gardeners are trying to jumpstart the season, whether it's with, you know, peas and spinach and things that'll take it cool, and end the season with things that will tolerate frost, or using row covers or cloches. But still the majority, I think, you know, it's the safest thing to do and easiest to find are the finished baskets or the bigger planters. So if something died, you just get a container and put it in its place.
I think my son was saying, you know, if I really wanted things, I'd just buy a big hanging basket and then separate it.
Yes, exactly. And one of my friends said what he does is when he's got a dead spot, he just buries a hanging basket in the garden, the basket part, and it looks like a ready-to-go garden. So you cover up any dead stuff that, you know, nobody has to know.
I think I just recently saw someone had either written a book or an article, and I should know better since I'm talking about this on the radio, but it was about the problem with lightning bugs beginning to disappear. Did you hear anything about that? And the reason I bring it up was, as we sat on my son's patio, the entire yard was just full of lightning bugs. And it was so funny to see them and the bats flying overhead. And it was a different world for us.
Everything we don't have here in California.
Yeah, but I did hear something about that, and I can't remember the cause of concern for lightning bugs.
And I wonder, I don't know either, so I shouldn't probably be speaking either, but I know one of the things that, you know, we often are spraying for mosquitoes, some people are, you know, and I get it, they're very much of a nuisance, but when you spray the yard for mosquitoes, you're killing a lot of good guys. I don't know if that's what's having an impact on the lightning bugs, but I think sometimes we have a disconnect between, you know, treating for one problem, not being aware, you know, not trying to do the wrong thing, but not being aware that impact on other things that are living in the bushes along with the adult mosquitoes might be causing issues. And so, you know, I like to use, whenever possible, more environmentally friendly things. And I know mosquitoes are annoying and some people have bad reactions, you know, wearing long sleeves, like colored clothes that are less attractive. I know gardeners that even take a box fan out when they garden because mosquitoes are weak flyers. And so that will, kind of help protect you in that small area. Or on your patio or deck in the evening when you're entertaining, have a fan going so that you could look for other alternatives. And then, of course, keeping standing water out of the yard. So at least they're not breeding. You can't control the neighborhood, but at least you can reduce the breeding grounds on your property. And then using some eco-friendly thing like mosquito dunks that you pop in your, water features and it kills the larvae. And so at least you're reducing the population. And you mentioned bats and even dragonflies. If there's water in the area, good water in the area, the dragonflies eat lots of mosquitoes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like a couple hundred a day. It's pretty amazing.
When we were on the back patio looking at the bats, Brian, I thought of you because my son was relating a story that our neighbor, when he was growing up, he was the same age, so they would play together. And he says, Alex told me that if you put rocks in a sock and then throw it up in the air, that the bats would grab it and it would pull them down to the ground. And I said, are you sure?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but Alex is also the same guy that told me that he surfed on a dolphin. But you know what? He threw the rock up in the sock and the bats went after it.
They went after it? Really?
Yeah, and then I looked up on the internet and it says how to catch bats with rocks in a sock.
So they grab onto the sock?
Alex was right. He wasn't blind this time.
Yeah, and the only reason he knew is because the first time he put I think it was a baseball in, and he said, and they didn't get it.
Now we just have to substantiate the dolphin story.
Yeah, I don't think the dolphin story was true, but he did text Alex's younger brother, Andy, and Andy says, no, it's true. He says,
Wow.
We used to do that out in the desert with the rocks. So.
And then what do you do with the bat when you catch it?
Oh, yeah.
The person who said catch a bat with the rocks in a sock.
I don't think you want to get close to the bat after you.
I don't think so either.
Now, are these fruit bats where you were in Indiana, John? What kind of bats are you guys looking at?
No, just regular, do you remember the old Andy Griffith show when Barney Fife, they went into a cave and he was warning people to watch out for the bats?
Vampire bats, right?
No, he said the bats get in your hair, get tangled, lay their eggs, and you go crazy. So, so you do have to be careful. And that brings us to one of the reasons we wanted Melinda on the air today.
Yeah, to sift through all these urban legends, right?
Okay.
No, this is the time of year, we've been talking a little bit roundabout about insects and pollinators, and I did notice a lot of milkweed when we were back in Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of stores selling and a lot of stores out here to attract butterflies. So I thought we'd ask Melinda to give us some of her ideas on pollinators.
We've got a few minutes in this segment, so go right ahead.
Well, a couple things that I think, the exciting part is more and more people are aware of the importance of pollinators and how we depend upon them and what we need to do to support them. So plants, which is gardeners, that's easy to do, right? Native plants whenever possible and suitable, but even cultivated plants that support the pollinators. One thing I like to recommend is people take a shallow container, fill it with damp sand, sprinkle a little sea salt or wood ash, set it in the ground so it's even, and then watch the bees and butterflies lap up the mineral-rich water. So it helps support them. Great photo op in a great way. You don't need to tend too much, just keep adding water. A flat rock for pollinators, for the butterflies to spread their wings and warm. And then, of course, the plants, and then water. Insects need water, and, we're whining about being dry in the Midwest, but I'm finding lots of bees and wasps and other insects at my bird bath. So a bird bath with gentle sloping sides, put some stones in there so they can sit on the stone and lap up the water without taking a bath. Water is important and often overlooked when we think about the importance of insects. And then plants. If you can do it in a mass, then they don't have to spend so much energy going from this coneflower to the neighbor's coneflower, but they've got a group of them. Or the monarch caterpillars having the milkweed that they can lay their eggs upon, and the caterpillars can eat the food. Parsley, dill, fennel, great host plants for swallowtail caterpillars. And so having food for all stages is really important as well.
Going back to what you started with, talk a little bit about maybe the specifics, because I know a lot of our listeners are wondering, what was she saying about putting salt and what do you do?
You know what? We got to take a break, Melinda.
All right, but I'm going to let her think about that while we're breaking, and we'll be right back.
It's a great setup. Thank you, John. So those of you on Facebook Live, questions, comments for Melinda, myself, John Bagnasco. Facebook Live, Biz Talk Radio. This is a pre-recorded show from last week to our friends on Biz Talk Radio. We've set up Melinda with a great question, so do stay with us as we take a break and listen to these sponsors, our supporters on Biz Talk Radio. Stay with us. All righty, we are back. Those that are tuned in on the Biz Talk Radio, this is the final segment of hour number 1. Hopefully you carry both hours. News coming up top of the hour, 6 minutes after. We are back with hour number 2. John, quickly reset the stage, reset the question for Melinda for those that may just be joining us.
Well, Melinda gave a great tip on how to satisfy some of the needs of our pollinators that we normally don't think of. We think that they go right to flowers. We never think about them needing source of moisture or water. And I wondered if you'd just go over the specifics on how to make that little feeding tray or drinking tray you were talking about.
You bet. So if you ever see like a gravel parking lot or road or side of the road where there's gravel right after rain, you'll often see bees and butterflies lapping up that mineral-rich water coming off of the stones. And so you can do the same thing by just taking a shallow container, filling it with sand, keeping it damp, and then sprinkling either wood ash, now obviously not treated wood or anything like that,
right,
or just sea salt, or sea salt, just a pinch sprinkling on the surface, and then keeping that damp, and then you'll find them getting those minerals that they need, along with all the nectar and pollen you're providing in your landscape. One of the things, this is a subject that I think we are all learning more and more about as they're doing more research on pollinators. The other thing that I kind of learned a few years ago is, it's obvious we don't want to use insecticides unless we absolutely have to. We want to be careful because, insecticides kill insects and we're trying to attract them. Fungicides have a negative impact as well. Bees make this pollen bread, and they use a natural fungi to do this. And so if we use fungicides, not being really careful, we can also harm our pollinators. And we don't make that connection. I hadn't thought about it, that, the fungicide is going to kill some of the good ones. So we need to either avoid using them or be very careful when we use them so that we're not harming the good fungi that plants depend upon, but also that our pollinators, like our native bees, need to make this bee pollen, which is a source of bee pollen bread, which is a source of food for them.
You just mentioned native bees, and that's something we don't think about because the European honeybee is just that. It came from Europe. So prior to Columbus, there were no honeybees in the United States, but plants got along perfectly well. And I know there's been, in the last maybe 20, 30 years, a re-emphasis on increasing the amount of native bees.
You bet. There are something like 20,000 bee species in the world, and I think it's 4,000 or 5,000 that are native to North America. And like you said, they've been taking care of our needs for many years, and many are very specific. There's the orchard bee, which is a type of mason bee that is attracted to and pollinates a lot of our apples and fruit crops. There's a squash bee that is very specific and pollinates squash plants. And so they do pollinate a lot of our food that we depend upon for eating. And there was even something I read about recently that there are even some people that are trying to commercialize bumblebees and use those because bumblebees are great for tomato greenhouses. Their bodies are set up to help pollinate tomatoes. Tomatoes don't really need pollinators. When the plant moves, the pollen goes from the male to the female part. But the way the bumblebee works, they buzz pollinate, I've heard it described. And so when they're in there, after the pollen, they shake up that flower, so they increase pollination, which means more fruit production. And especially with tomatoes in a greenhouse, they may not have that natural flow of air causing them to move and for the pollen to be transferred. So I think we keep learning lots of new things. And one of the things I confessed to Tiger that he asked if I kept bees, and I think you do, right, John?
We did.
Me too. I did too. I had them for 2 years and lost them. We tend to lose our bees sometimes in winter, and I thought, I'm going to focus on the native bees because they don't need as much of my help as the honeybees in the hive do.
Uh-huh. It's funny that maybe it was in preparation for this show, but I got stung on my ring finger by a bee a couple days ago.
You really?
It's a reminder.
Yeah, well,
that's really good show prep, John.
Yeah, I walked into the house, was in the bedroom, and I felt something crawling on my neck. So I reached back with my hand and got stung.
I guess better your finger than your neck, maybe?
I don't know, because being my ring finger,
true.
It swelled and I couldn't move my ring, and I think it exacerbated the problem, and it's just now going down after 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Bees don't really sting us unless they're frightened or trapped.
Right.
And bumblebees, I've always gardened amongst the bumblebees, but I accidentally stumbled upon a bumblebee. They do have a colony, and they usually go in abandoned rodent holes. And I was weeding this area, and there was a rodent hole, ground squirrel hole, and I didn't think anything of it until the bumblebee came out and chased me out of the garden.
Yeah.
And, I was invading its space. So obviously those weeds stayed in that area. They moved on, so the next year I could weed that area. But otherwise, they're very gentle and docile, so it's just avoiding that space. And I did want to mention there's a lot of ground bees that I think most of our native bees are solitary. They're neighborly, like mason bees. They will nest near other mason bees, but they're solitary. And the majority live in the ground. And unfortunately, I think that's where we have conflict. Gardeners have a space. They want to put a plant. They waited too long. The ground bees have moved in, or it's right by the front door. And so leaving a space, south-facing slope where it warms up, leave it bare, that's another way to help encourage them to hopefully nest there, out of the way, and then mulch those areas if you don't get them planted so that you discourage the ground bees from nesting where you may have some contact and it would be a bad situation.
One of our listeners just posted on Facebook that up in the Bay Area they have mason bees and that they love roses. And I wasn't aware that they specifically liked roses, but she should know because she has 2,000 roses.
Wow. And there's several different kinds of mason bees, and so it's nice to hear that she's seeing them and enjoying their visiting her roses. There's also a bee called a leafcutter bee, and when you mentioned roses...
Hey, Melinda, I'm sorry to cut you off. We have to take a break. We've got to meet our network obligations, so hold that train of thought. We've got news coming up top of the hour on Biz Talk Radio. We're going to return even quicker, though, on Facebook Live to continue our conversation this afternoon with Melinda Myers. So do stay with us. And again, our apologies, Melinda, but I got to stay right there on the clock for our network and our affiliates. So, along with John Bagnasco, I'm Brian Main. Tiger is off this weekend. News coming up right now on Biz Talk Radio. We are back at 6 minutes after, back even quicker on Facebook Live with Melinda Myers. Do stay with us. All righty, we are back. It is hour number 2 on Biz Talk Radio. We just continue on with our segments here on Facebook Live, so thank you for tuning in. A lot of good comments, too, as I look at our Facebook comment page, enjoying the information from Melinda Myers. And, of course, John, myself, appreciate Linda for taking time and spending time with us on this weekend. John, as we return, and again, our apologies for cutting Melinda off.
Well, and speaking of cutting, Melinda was just
That was good.
was just talking about leaf cutter bees. And that's something that anyone who's been in the industry for a while always gets this question. Here's the problem. What can I spray to take care of it? And I'm sure Melinda will tell us what to do.
Leaf cutter bees, if you look on like clematis and roses, it looks like someone took a hole punch and cut a hole out of the edge of the leaf. And then that leaf cutter bee, which is a solitary bee that nests in like insect, galleries from beetles and trees or other holes, takes that leaf back and they line their nest with it for the eggs that they lay and the larva that they're going to, when the egg hatches. And so it doesn't really hurt the plant. You see the damage, so to speak,
right,
but really it's minimal compared to the benefits we get from that leaf cutter bee. And so you bring up a good point. We see holes, we see spots, we think, oh, we got to get out the pesticide and spray, when sometimes the insect is gone. Sometimes it's a good guy like the leaf cutter bee. Sometimes we need to wait for the good guys to come in and eat the bad guys, the ones causing the problem. I just, for the month of June was National Pollinator Month, and on my website there's a link, but also if you go to atc-growsmart, one word, .com/library, or go to my website, there's a link to atc-growsmart.com/library. There's a link to 3 webinars. They're free to watch, and they're also on my website, some videos for families to do with kids. And then just more information for how we can help support the pollinators and get the young gardeners in our lives involved as well. I always laugh. I'm a grandma, so that's a good excuse to do kid stuff because I just make my grandkids come with me and do it. So, it's things we can do to help support the pollinators, educate, and have fun all at the same time.
And your website was Melinda, or is melindamyers.com, correct?
You bet, melindamyers.com.
Right.
So, yeah, that information is there as well. Might be easier to get there that way.
Right. And Myers is Myers. So melindamyers.com. Great website. There's all kinds of good information on there. So, and I think we have a link in our newsletter to that also, but it's an easy one to remember. So
right.
That was a good point on the leafcutter bees. They're not going to hurt the plant at all. And they are beneficial. If you're trying to show roses in a rose show, you might go back to the row cover that Melinda was talking about and protect your roses during that period of time. Growing a number of varieties of roses over the year, I've noticed that they prefer certain varieties. I don't know if it's because of the thickness of the leaf or, some roses have heavier waxy leaves, some have really thin leaves, but usually they won't attack every rose bush. So if you have leaf cutter bees, say you have 50 roses, not every one is going to have holes in it. So live and let live.
That's a really good advice. And they're also doing research on host plants that, for the beneficial insects we want to attract, that purple-leafed plants are less favored by a lot of insects when they're laying their eggs and looking for host plants. And I've noticed that even with cabbage, that I have more problems with cabbage worms on my green-leafed cabbage than my red leaf. They will go after the red-leaf cabbage, but not at the same level. So I was like, so, make sure you mix it up. I grow cultivated plants. I grow native plants. I like both. And so, if you're a gardener and you can't resist, I'm not an all or nothing person. I think we can support pollinators and have the best of both worlds,
I agree with you 100%. And, more out of necessity than anything else, going through a move the last couple of years and just beginning to put plants in the ground now, I still have close to 1,500 roses in containers. And when you've got that, you've got so many things going on. I couldn't have sprayed if I wanted to. But I would dare say that with the 1,500 roses in my yard right now, if you went out and looked for an aphid, it would be almost impossible to find one. And it's because of the balance Melinda was talking about, that you get the beneficials build up, and if they have a source of food, everything will come into balance. I'm sure you could maybe eventually find an aphid, but virtually none.
But point well taken.
Yeah.
In our songbirds, I have a hummingbird feeder outside my kitchen window, and I have a major wheeler honeysuckle vine, a cultivar of our native that doesn't get powdery mildew. And I watched the hummingbird eat the aphids on my honeysuckle, sip the nectar from the flowers, get a little sip from the feeder. And in songbirds, I think it's like 86% or more of our songbirds eat insects. It's a source of protein for them. So bringing in birds, they're going to take out maybe some of the good guys too, but they eat a lot of the aphids and other insects. And so it's that whole inviting nature in to help us manage those garden pests, like you said.
Now, sometimes you'll have an insect that will eat another insect, but it's not good for your plants. And what I'm thinking of is earwigs.
Yeah.
Will eat aphids. Not aphids, thrips, but then they also eat the flower buds. So I don't know if that's much help.
Yeah. I read somewhere that in the UK they have earwig houses, and I always have visions of this Brit with a little house full of earwigs, which are very fast-moving, running to the orchard to hang them up there to eat the codling moth. But, yeah, earwigs are, not many insects give me the creeps, but that's one that's kind of, yeah. And crumpled paper under a terracotta pot. I learned from some gardeners in Hamilton, Canada, at the Royal Botanic Garden, they take the cylinder from the center of paper towel roll. Mm-hmm. They just wrap it in packing tape to weatherproof it, leave the ends open, stick straws in. In the morning, the earwigs have collected in those straws, hands on both ends, and then dump them into a can of soapy water. So, it's a trap that's a little more mobile because those earwigs move fast. And, that's a more eco-friendly way to manage them.
What a great tip. I think I need to get maybe 300 or 400 rolls, put them out in my yard. And... do we have time for a question, Brian?
We've got time. Yeah, actually we do. Go ahead.
Okay. This is from Gina in Idaho. And she says, after watching the Chelsea Garden Show, a lot of the gardens had pollinator houses, and she wants to know if you have any experience and do they really help?
Yeah, one of the things with pollinator houses, and we do have a tip on making and caring for a native bee house on my website and that whole mix of things. The key thing with the pollinator houses are keeping them clean because we're trying to attract them, and we need to make sure the holes for the openings are the right size. The material used is correct. There's a lot of information and debate on bamboo, not so good. Native reeds in a bucket might be better. Straws that are paper, not plastic. And the size of the hole will determine who nests in there. Keeping it clean to avoid fungal disease problems. And so, especially if you're in an urban area where you don't have dead trees or logs laying on the ground where these things can nest naturally, they can be helpful. On my handout, Making and Caring for a Bee House, I've got some good resources. I did a lot of research trying to find out, there's a lot of good information and a lot of bad information out there. So the key is making sure you're supporting the pollinators you want to attract. Butterfly houses, I've heard, not so effective or necessary. Bee houses will work as long as they're clean. And the good part is it's kind of fun to watch them. I was at the California Spring Trials a few years ago, and one of the breeders had a mason bee house, and we just stood for 20 minutes, and the female would back in, lay an egg, come out, get a dab of mud, go in head first, seal off that egg, come back out, back in, lay an egg. So it was very cool to watch the process, which you can't see when they're doing it in the tree in the woods.
Hey, Melinda, we got to take a quick break. We're going to come back, though. We got a break for our friends on Biz Talk Radio. So sorry again, Melinda, but she understands. She's a veteran of the media, John, so we do appreciate her patience. All right, that said, as I mentioned, those on Facebook Live, Biz Talk Radio, we're going to take a break back after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. Stay with us. Okay, we are back. Thank you for sitting through the break on Biz Talk Radio. Just a reminder, this is a pre-recorded show from last week. You can also go to our website, gardenamerica.com. It's always changing, always new things. And, of course, our YouTube channel, Garden America Radio. Back with a very patient Melinda Myers as we continue our conversation, John. And, again, thank you, Melinda, for being there. Thank you for understanding our network commitments with our timing.
Yeah, and we, as always, are having a great time and getting a lot of new information from Melinda and being reminded of old information that maybe we haven't been thinking of. And we did leave her in the middle of a thought last time.
Again.
So we'll let you finish that thought, Melinda.
Well, and you know what? That break was long enough that...
Did you forgot what you were talking about?
That I forgot. But I think the key is, when, I want people to, just relax, do a little research, grow your plants, try to think about what we do to our plants so that we can enjoy them, so the pollinators are available, inviting in birds, songbirds. And if you let nature feed them, you don't have to clean the feeder, provide some water, and it's really easier than we think. And when we select our plants, look at those with multiple seasons of interest and that provide nectar in, a variety that you get food for. In our neck of the woods, it's spring, summer, and fall, seed heads for the birds in winter, and homes for them as well. Leaving your plant stand for winter so that those are the homes for many beneficial insects, delaying the cleanup in the spring. So there's lots of things we can do with few changes in how we garden that will help support our pollinators.
Great points, Melinda. Before we let you go, are you making any appearances that our listeners might want to be aware of?
You bet. So the Wisconsin State Fair, so if you're in the area in southeast Wisconsin, August 4th through 14th, I will be presenting 3 times a day, every day at the Wisconsin State Fair. I appear in the We Energy Park. We put the garden together. And this year I'm doing affordable food gardening, container gardening, edible and ornamental container gardening, and tips for growing your favorite vegetables. So 3 different talks every day. It's a great time. I'm out in the garden speaking at the fair,
Wow.
Doesn't get much better than that. Lots of food and lots of fun, and it's always great to see gardeners in person.
Well, thank you so much, Melinda. It's always a pleasure and lots of fun talking to you, and enjoy the rest of your summer and harvest. And want to tell our listeners, go to melindamyers.com and you'll find gardening information you didn't even know you needed.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. You guys always make my day. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
And we'll have Melinda on again as we move toward the fall, winter months, because there's always things that are happening and changing, John, as you well know. And we'll get some more fall and winter tips.
Well, Melinda is, for years, she has a larger property now, but for years she gardened the way that you do right now.
Right.
Before
Small patio gardening?
Yeah, before you moved into your condo, you had a larger garden, but now you're confined to patio gardening and then out the walkway gardening to the road gardening.
You know what? I like that, out the walkway gardening. You saw it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I had to because I ran out of room.
Yeah.
And I kept waiting for the HOA or the neighbors to say, hey, you can't put those plants there. That's part of the HOA. Nobody said a word. And when the HOA landscapers come by, they're very respectful. They rake around the plants.
Right.
They move the pots. They move them back. So I think because it blends in so well with the property and looks good, I think that's why nobody has really said anything. And actually myself, I upkeep or do a lot of the maintenance for the HOA property anyway, in and around my area.
Well, my point was that Melinda, being an expert in container gardening, she's written a lot of books about container gardening. So even if you have more than a patio, but you want some ideas on, hey, I would like to put a pot here. What
Sure.
could I grow in it? Or even vegetables. Somebody sent me an email during the week, wanted to know why their Paul Robeson tomatoes were dying. And she sent me a picture, and it looked like they might have had either fusarium wilt or fusarium blight or verticillium wilt. And, once that's in the soil, you can't get rid of it. But she really likes Paul Robeson tomatoes. So I said, if you can't plant in a different area, use a container and put in fresh potting soil, and then you can eliminate the problem that way.
So go from the ground to a pot.
Right. But you got to start new with fresh soil.
You do have much more control in a pot. For sure, you can control the environment a lot better.
Right.
I don't have anything really in the ground myself, so everything I do is what I call potscaping.
Well, you do. You have some things go in the ground from the pot. They go out the hole in the bottom of the pot.
You're thinking of the ficus story.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's putting on a ton of growth, and you think it's because you're doing such a great job.
That is funny. The first time that I tried to move that pot, and it didn't budge at all,
Right.
and those roots had gone straight into the ground. It's funny because I was moving a pot the other day, a palm, and the same thing kind of happened. I picked it up, and I wiggled it from side to side, and I went, "Oh boy, hold on
Here we go."
But I dealt with that immediately.
I'm trying to think of right now. I'm at the point in my yard where I can't plant things fast enough. Mainly because I'm older and I get tired quick.
I thought because you had so much room, you can't wait to take up all the room that you have.
Well, I've started doing areas. My daughter, while she was there, was nice enough to do the whole back of the house where I have one section with about 100 roses that I lost the labels on.
So you have no idea what
So I have
they
no
are.
idea what they are. And because of that, maybe I gave more attention to the ones I did know what they are. So,
True.
So they were full of weeds. It looked like a meadow almost, even though everything was in pots. And Gina was nice enough to pull all the weeds out of the pots. Wow. And it looks good. I'm inspired to plant that area now.
Yeah, because it's all nice and clean. There's no
Right.
weeds, of course.
But what I started doing is planting sections. I think I've mentioned a few times that I have about 100 polyantha roses, and they're going on what I call polyantha hill. So all those roses are going together. Then I have a tropical hill where I've got hibiscus and plumeria,
Really?
things like that. And then
Sounds like layers to me.
well, levels is what you
Levels,
need
I
in
mean,
your
yeah.
yard, yeah.
Levels and layers.
So in the back, I have an area where I'm going to do African and Australian plants. Not that Africa and Australia are that close in continents, but a lot of the plants are similar in their environmental requirements.
Well, I like the fact that you're starting off with the A's. A, B, C.
Well, I hadn't thought of that. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And I find that it's easier it's overwhelming when you look at 3.5 acres and go,
yeah.
Where do these things go? But if you start with the section and you just have an idea in your head, I'm going to put this type of plant here, then you can begin planting them one at a time.
Right.
It's fun.
We're going to take a break. We have 2 more segments left. Plenty of time for questions, comments for our friends on Facebook Live on the chat column, right-hand side of your computer. And again, those on Biz Talk Radio, we're going to take a break for our sponsors. Thank you for tuning in each and every week. And again, a reminder for those on Biz Talk Radio, this is a pre-recorded show, but again, you can catch us live. Go to our Facebook page, Garden America Radio Show, every week, 11 o'clock Eastern Time Zone, 8 o'clock on the Pacific Coast, Western Time Zone, and you can watch us live and interact. I'm Brian Main. John Begnasco, Tigers off this week. Back after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. And just like that, we are back. Those on Facebook Live, thank you for tuning in. It's good to see your questions, your comments, still plenty of time. Those on Biz Talk Radio, thank you for tuning in. And thanks to the good folks at the network who keep us on the air, in particular Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie, for the great job that you do.
Hey, I was thinking that now's probably the time to clear up misunderstanding or misconception with some of our listeners, and not just the listeners, but even centers don't understand.
I like this new segment of yours, John. This is a good segment. I like this.
Clear up a misunderstanding segment?
Right.
So now is the time, if you're in a warm winter area like Southern California, to plant your winter tomatoes. And a lot of garden centers tell their customers that a winter tomato is one that's a short season tomato. For instance, Early Girl, which only takes maybe 60 days to ripen. And that's not true. A cool season tomato is one that will set fruit when nighttime temperatures get down into the low 40s, even high 30s. They'll continue to set fruit.
So there's more tolerance for the colder temperature.
Right. And those tomatoes, I think we've mentioned a few times before, normally come from cold areas like Canada or Russia, where they have cooler seasons and cooler nighttime temperatures. So you can plant a short season tomato and not get any fruit this winter, just because even though it doesn't take a long time to produce its fruit, it's not going to produce it when the temperatures are cold.
I got you. Okay.
So normally when temperatures are, say, below 60, you're not going to get fruit from a tomato unless it is a cool season tomato. So those are the varieties to look for. And like I mentioned, a lot of them will have names that sound cold, like maybe where they're from, Manitoba.
Is there a I want to say Siberia?
There's yes, there's a Siberian.
Yeah, what's the name? There's more to the name though.
There is it just
we
went out of my head.
we talked a lot about these cool season tomatoes in the past, and you're right. The names denote the fact that it's cold or chill.
Yeah, there's a series of tomatoes that were developed in Greenland for the military force that was stationed in Greenland, and they obviously had to have tomatoes that were short season.
Right.
So they have Arctic in the name. So Arctic, whatever.
Yes.
Anyway, that's something to look for. Normally you have to get those from seed. You're not able to find cool season tomatoes everywhere, but check your local garden center, and you do have time to plant them now from seed if you do it right away, say within the next couple weeks. The reason that you need to plant your cool season tomatoes now, because I can see the question in your mind, Brian. You're saying it's hot. Why am I planting cool season?
Why am I doing it now?
Yes. Well, the reason, Brian, is that excuse me, I get choked up when I talk about tomatoes.
You're a very emotional guy, John.
Yeah. Tomatoes don't grow in cold weather. So in order to get the plants to be large enough, you've got to plant them when the weather's warm, like now.
To give them time to establish?
Right. So if you plant them now, you'll get nice plants, and when the weather cools off, they'll be flowering, and you'll get your fruit. So how about that? Stupichka was another one of those.
Stupichka, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Used to love that.
Love that, absolutely.
Should we tell the story about how we learned how to pronounce that?
How did we learn how to pronounce that?
Do you remember how to?
Stupichka.
Yeah. Do you remember how to spell it?
Stupice. Yeah, Stupichka, yeah.
But a lot of people pronounced it stupus. And I think we did years ago before we knew better.
Before we were called on the carpet.
And it was a listener who called this show because Stupichka is a variety of tomato from Czechoslovakia, or what would now be the Czech Republic. And the listener called and he said that, by the way, the only thing stupus about that tomato
is the way you pronounce it.
Is the way you pronounce it.
I do remember that. Yes.
And he told us it was Stupichka.
Hey, do you want to read that comment from Connie? It's right on topic.
She said, thank you for winter tomato news. My husband and I argue. We're getting in the middle of this.
It's okay.
About the end of tomato season each year, and he wants to rip everything out and be done until next year. I say it's California, and people will grow, people will grow here all winter. Yeah, it is. But again, Connie, your husband's right if it's a tomato that you've been planting during the summer.
Right.
Because that's not going to set fruit when the temperatures are cold. So
it goes a little bit both ways then.
yeah, so make peace with your husband and say, here's the varieties that will do well, and we want to plant those now. I think we had a link in our newsletter or something about winter tomatoes. We used the varieties that our old friend Steve Godo, or late friend Steve Godo, had, who was really the proponent of cool season tomatoes.
Exactly right.
Yeah, we listed some of the varieties that he recommended.
Wouldn't you recommend also that people go to our website, John, and subscribe to the newsletter? I think it's very easy to do right now. I was surprised. I went to the website a couple of times, and both times I went was a little different. It changed a little bit. So it's always refreshing itself, and I think the newsletter, it's very easy to subscribe, and you receive it every Friday, and you're still not sharing any information, too, which I think is nice of you.
5 o'clock every Friday.
5 o'clock every Friday is when you'll receive it.
Yeah.
So how about that? AM, of course.
Right.
So that's our Garden America newsletter. There's articles, there's pictures, people send in pictures of what's growing.
And we always appreciate those, too.
Yeah.
We like to see what's going on in your yard.
It's a great way to stay in touch and to keep up with the show. And I'm always, I don't want to say surprised, but I'm taken aback at all the people that do send in pictures every week. It keeps the newsletter very current.
Rarely are you taken aback.
Yeah, but
that'll
that's one
do it.
time
Yeah.
that I'm taken aback, and you do a great job with the newsletter. Oh, aren't you guys peacemakers? Thank you, Connie. Part of what we do here.
I think it's
Keeping the peace.
Yeah, I think it's a trait that you develop as you get older.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I notice I'm a lot mellower than I used to be.
So we talked about the heat earlier. When you get home today, how long have you been home now from your vacation?
We got home last Saturday.
Okay, so you've been home a week.
Yeah, Saturday evening, so maybe Sunday.
So getting back to my question, what's in store for you when you get home today,
Well,
garden-wise?
I've got to, at the lower 40, I've got to go water those roses this morning. I'll give the chickens some treats. And then I will come up and if it's not too hot, I'll start planting. I've got some more roses to go in the ground.
What are you giving those chickens for treats?
Bugs.
Yeah. Who doesn't like a good bug, right?
Yeah. Well,
Some protein.
Yeah, they sell dried mealworms and mixed with some other things, and
They like larvae too. If you can get a hold of some larvae of anything.
well, there's larvae in there.
Yeah.
That's what mealworms are, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You used to feed those to your lizards, right?
Yeah. What kind of lizard was that? I forget.
You had a chameleon, I know that.
Chameleon at one time. And then I had a snake. You remember the corn snake that I had?
Yeah, the one that bit you.
Well, he was, for the first 2 years, the gentlest snake. And I reached into into his environment one day, and I said, did he just bite me? No. And I kept on cleaning, and he did it again. And then this went on. So I contacted a reptile house, and they said, well, probably coming into maturity. It's something that he will get over after a while, but... And I said, yeah, I don't like the butt. So they said, well, bring him in. We don't buy them, but we'll throw him into an environment, into a cage with a lot of other ones, and he'll be very happy.
Oh.
So that's what we did. Just didn't like him biting me. So now I have fish. Fish don't bite.
Well, have
Well,
you
if
heard
you're
of
fishing-
piranhas?
If you're fishing, you want them to bite.
Right.
Piranhas, that's another story, John.
Speaking of another story, this thought just popped into my mind. And last time I brought this up, you castigated me because you said that you have a schedule. You can't work around mine whenever I come up with this. There is going to be a rose show October 29th. If you can check your schedule so that you can be the auctioneer for the...
Is this another auction?
Yeah, it's going to be an auction and a rose show.
Where?
Oceanside.
Same people?
Same people.
In Ocean. Oh, that's a long way away.
I know. That's why I'm telling you now.
Yeah. Is this so that I can't say you didn't warn me?
Right. You don't like it when I tell you like the
Is
week
Tiger
before.
gonna go? I'll go if Tiger goes. I like the good old Tiger support.
All right.
We'll figure it out. California Coastal Rose Society.
That's right. In combination with the San Diego Rose Society, who's going to be really pretty much hosting the Rose Show. So that'll be kind of cool.
It's on a weekend, right?
Yeah, it's Sunday.
That's better. That's a lot better.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to take a break. We have one more segment coming up as time sure flies by when you're having a good time. And John and I are back in the studio. I want to thank Melinda Myers. What a great guest. Again, so one more segment. Still time for your questions or comments there. Facebook Live. And again, welcoming those on Biz Talk Radio. Stay with us. Hey, that's going to do it. Well, not quite. Don't panic. We have one more segment to go. This is that one more segment, but it's been a very fast show so far. We thank you for tuning in. First time back in the studio in a few weeks, so we appreciate you being right there with us. Those on Biz Talk Radio listening, those on Facebook Live watching, myself, John Begnasco. Tiger is in Temecula, California at a soccer tournament with his son. He is back next week, so we'll get the crew back, the A-team next week here on Garden America. In the meantime, we appreciate your questions, your comments. A lot happening this week. John's going to go home and water his, I guess, your bottom 40. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the roses in the bottom 40. I can't. It takes me an hour and a half to water the roses up on top, hour and a half to 2 hours, and another hour to water the ones below. So if I water everything on the same day, that's a long time.
It's almost as if
three and a half hours.
Once you're done watering everything, it's time to rewater everything again.
Pretty much. And when the temperatures are in the 90s, then everything does have to be watered every day.
But I like the fact that, in fact, we want to get some pictures too. When you're out there in the heat, taking your shirt off and the beads of sweat that glisten down your
I do
chest.
take my shirt off when I'm watering.
Bet you do.
Yeah.
I think we're caught up on the questions.
We are. And if you do, we just started this segment, but if you do have a question, you want to post it on Facebook, we'll try to get to it right away.
Sure. We've got about 5 minutes, so that's a long time.
It is, especially if you don't have anything to say. But when it comes to gardening, we've always got something to say.
And you know what? If we don't know what to say, we'll make something up.
What do you have anything blooming on your patio right now?
What do I have blooming? Pope John Paul rose just bloomed.
Nicely fragrant, too.
That's the best. It really is. I cut it, bring it inside the house. Dana's happy. It smells good. What else is blooming? It's a little quiet right now.
You showed me a picture that I thought was interesting because I gave you a bottle tree.
I'm just amazed at how fast you're not that amazed. I am.
Well, it's a slow-growing tree, really.
No.
But the reason...
It's like bamboo.
Well, it's not quite like bamboo, but yours grew fast for a particular reason.
You really believe that? I mean...
yeah, that had to be the reason.
Because my aquarium guy who comes over once a month,
right?
He asked me about a month ago, he said, hey, I don't want to waste this water. Can I dump it in some of your pots? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. And I didn't watch exactly where he dumped it. He dumped it in a couple of the pots, I should say. But one in particular was the Australian bottleneck tree, which at that time was about maybe 5 feet tall, maybe. And so the next day I went out there and I saw that he had dumped it in there. And you telling me, hey, don't water that. Be careful on the watering.
Yeah, you don't want to overwater.
And I thought, oh boy, I blew it. Well, then this thing took off. And all those nutrients and all that good bacteria that came out of the aquarium water,
right?
It loved it.
Fish poop.
I mean, this thing,
right?
This thing, not quite as fast as bamboo, but pretty darn close. And it is tall. It's about, if I stand up, I can barely reach my hand to the very top of it, and it's just underneath the balcony right now.
We have a tech question from Daniel. It's not referring to tech, though. He says his neighbor's garden's attracting skunks, and is there anything that he can do to discourage them from coming around?
I think they're going after grubs.
Yeah, the only reason the skunks are there is for food, and they will dig in the soil to get rid of grubs.
Yeah.
So if you go to your local garden center or home improvement center and you get a soil insect control, and you sprinkle it over the area, that will kill the grubs, and then they won't come by anymore.
Did you see Paula's question?
Can you ever release a
Reuse, I think.
reuse a 20-inch box that had tomato with
Fusilium wilt.
verticillium wilt or fusarium blight? Can you reuse it? You can if you empty out all the soil. Now, this is assuming you want to plant tomatoes. If it's not tomatoes, you can put whatever you want back in there. It won't hurt other plants. But if you want to reuse it for tomatoes, you've got to dump out all the soil. And then I would get a 10% bleach solution, and I would spray it on the inside of the box and let it sit in the sun for a day or two. Then you can refill with new potting soil, and then you could reuse it.
Kind of a generic question, too, from Julio. John, when is the best time to plant tomato?
Well, it depends.
Depends on the tomato, right?
And we were just talking about that. If it's tomatoes, you want cool season tomatoes to fruit in the winter. Now you have to plant those right now.
Now's the time to do it.
Right. Other tomatoes, if you're in Southern California, you can plant the middle of March and start getting your fruit. You'd be harvesting right now.
Lenore says, my tomatoes are not blooming. It's too hot and all in containers. In this drought, it's hard with so many roses almost all dormant. Now, my tomatoes are doing very well. I've got little cherry tomatoes. We've been harvesting for the past month.
Cherry tomatoes are not as finicky when it comes to temperatures and setting fruit. But regular-sized tomatoes, and it's funny that Lenore is sending in this question because in the newsletter this week was a picture of tomatoes she had harvested. It was a huge plate of all different sizes of tomatoes.
Speaking of the newsletter.
But regular tomatoes will not set fruit if the nighttime temperatures are over, say, 75 degrees. They just stop.
It has to cool down at night a little bit, right?
And if daytime temperatures are over 90, again, they're not going to set fruit. You can try, shaking the plants a little bit. That might help, but usually the heat, there's nothing you can do except wait for cooler weather.
Well, John, that's going to do it. The timing is perfect as far as answering that last question. So thank you, those tuned in on Facebook Live. We really appreciate it. Those who tune into the pre-recorded show on Biz Talk Radio, thank you for your support. John, we'll do it again next week along with Tiger. Go home and water your levels, your layers, whatever you got going. And you look confused. You all right?
Well, I was just wondering if we were going to let Tiger back next week, but you said yes.
I think so. Yeah,
okay,
we'll
he
let
served
Tiger
his
back.
time. He can come back. All
Hey,
right.
enjoy the rest of your weekend. Be safe, stay healthy, have a good week, and we'll do it again next week right here on Facebook Live, Biz Talk Radio. We kick things off at 8 o'clock, Western Time Zone, Eastern Time Zone, 11 o'clock. For the entire crew, Tiger Palafox, John Begnasco, I'm Brian Main. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week right here on Garden America. Take care.